We hope that we aim to help women break barriers and shatter glass ceilings. So thank you for being with us today. This is our contact information. Make sure that if you get an opportunity and if it's something that you enjoy, join our community. W3 Empowerment is our tag on social media. Okay, so let's get back. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Karen Roy. Karen and I have known each other for many years. She works in the financial industry as I do, but Karen really has a passion for those with special needs. She has years and years of experience, and she is here to share that with us. So without further ado, Karen, take it away.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for virtually being with us tonight, especially after such a gorgeous day out there today. So just a little bit of a background on myself before we get started. As Adriana mentioned, I am a certified financial planner in Barrie, Ontario. And I'm also a mom. I raised 2 boys, one with disabilities, as a single parent working full time. Some might say it's quite amazing that I'm still somewhat sane today. But I think it gives me a good understanding, my background does, to what other special needs families are going through, what your challenges are, what your obstacles are on a daily basis, but more importantly, what keeps you up at night? What are your fears and your concerns? And I've been there, I've lived through it, so I think I have a lot I can sort of bring to the table with that. When I began to investigate what resources were available to help my family, I was extremely frustrated and overwhelmed by the lack of, dare I say, credible information that's out there, and also by the lack of coordination and communication between various agencies and organizations and professionals. So each person seemed to know their own profession, but didn't know how it kind of needed to be coordinated with the next person's area of expertise. So it took me a lot of years, a lot of gray hair, to finally get to a place where I thought I had a good solid plan in place for my family. So, and I'm in this business, and I found it difficult in years and years of trial and tribulation and whatnot. So I hope to make things a little easier for others, for other special needs families, by sharing what I've learned along the way, and hopefully to be able to guide you a little bit. So let's begin. I'm going to share my screen, and there we go. And then I also want to get my little red dot. Okay, there we go. So financial planning for those with special needs is what we're going to talk about this evening. And there's a lot of information I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to cram it all into hopefully about 45 minutes, and we can leave time for questions. So any questions, if you're able to, as they pop up into your head, jot them down or put them in the Q&A section or the chat box, and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. And so let's begin. So just a disclaimer stating that I'm giving information this evening, sharing on a very general basis. It's not intended to be advice personalized to your situation in any way. It's not investment, financial, legal, accounting, or tax advice. It's just general in nature. Okay. So the agenda for this evening is we're going to talk about some of the various resources: Ontario Disability Support Program, the Disability Tax Credit, the Registered Disability Savings Plan, and then we'll end with estate and will planning. All right. So the Ontario Disability Support Program, it is available to those that are over age 18 that live in Ontario, and you must be in financial need. So they figure that they consider it to be a program of last resort, that you should have exhausted all other financial areas before coming to this program to seek financial assistance. And it's important to note that with your person over the age of 18, it's based on their situation alone, not that of their parents. So if you have an 18-year-old child, as an example, that's still living at home, it does not matter what mom and dad's income is, what their asset level is. It's solely based on that 18-year-old individual. And the last criteria is you must meet the program's definition of a person with a disability. And it has to be, by their standards, a substantial physical or mental impairment that's continuous and expected to last a year or more. So the benefits of Ontario Disability Support, we'll start with sort of the bottom up here. Health benefits. So they do offer eyeglass protection, prescription medication, dental, those sorts of things. They also offer employment support. So they would put you in touch with a career agency that could help the individual with, job interview skills, practice for interviewing, resume writing, that sort of thing. And then the basic one that most people know Ontario Disability Support for is their income support. So that is a monthly income payment that depends, the amount depends on what your basic needs are, if you live at home, if you are living out on your own, so what your shelter situation looks like, and your family size. So all of that is put into consideration. And it's typically, if you're living at home, about $900 a month. And if you're out on your own, about $1,160 some odd dollars per month is the typical amount for a single person on ODSP. And I apologize in advance, I'll be using a lot of acronyms because it's just so prevalent in this world here that we're in. So with ODSP, as I mentioned, it is a financial last resort need. So there is asset and income tests. So somebody cannot have more than $40,000 as a single person to their name and be able to qualify for ODSP. So they have to have less than 40,000 of assets if they're single, less than 50,000 if they're in a spousal relationship. And there's also an income test. So you're allowed to earn up to $200 of income before it affects your ODSP. And then after that, it'll start to be clawed back. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And you're also allowed up to and only up to $10,000 a year in gifts or inheritance money or income from trusts. And we'll spend a little bit more time on this after as well. So with ODSP, you are allowed to own certain assets that are considered exempt. So you can own a home, you can own a primary vehicle, you can have money in an education savings plan, you can have money in a registered disability savings plan, and you can have obviously personal items without it affecting your ODSP. So the big question that most people have, and part of the I guess maybe the myth that people say, well, I don't want to work because I don't want to lose my ODSP. It will be affected, but it's not that you're going to lose it until you get above a certain income level. So it is still very incentive driven, the calculation, to encourage those to work. So here's an example, is somebody that is on ODSP, let's say they're living out on their own, they're a single person, they have $1,169 per month coming in. So now this person goes out and they begin working. So they're bringing in $1,500 a month after tax from their job. So now first to note is that it's very good in the calculation that they use. They started off using the net income. So after all the deductions have happened, not the gross, but the net income. So what the actual take-home amount is, they use that figure. So if you're bringing in $1,500, as we mentioned, the first $200 you earn, they don't touch. So that leaves us $1,300. Out of that $1,300, they're going to take 50% of your ODSP away. But what they do is with the ODSP, because now that you're working, they add a $100 benefit, a working benefit back in. So basically your $1,169 goes up to $1,269, and we lose $650 of that because that's half of the $1,300. So now instead of the $1,169, you're working and you're bringing in $2,119. So basically your ODSP went from $1,169, to $619. So yes, you do lose some of it, but it's still very incentive driven for you to be out there working. So just a few other points to note with ODSP. If you are going to school and you're working part-time, ODSP is not affected in any way. They don't take any of that into consideration. If you lose your job, so this was one that was so concerning for me. So with my son, my biggest fear is, oh my gosh, he realizes he needs to get out there and start working. But I'm terrified he's going to start a job, stop a job, start a job, lose a job, and it's just going to be this vicious roller coaster. But the nice thing with ODSP is each month you can complete your sort of paperwork to say, I did not work. They pay you the same amount. I did not work. They pay you the same amount. Oh, I worked a few hours. Here was my pay. They adjust that. So even if you're working, you lose your job, boom, the next month, it's back in action again. Your ODSP is back up there to the full amount. So that's really good to know. And also your health benefits can continue. So even if you're making enough now that you've lost your full ODSP benefit, they can still continue with covering you for dental and eyeglasses and whatnot if you don't have that coverage through your employment. So I'm going to touch on the disability tax credit now. So that is a non-refundable tax credit. So it's not something that's going to help you on a monthly basis by any means. It's something that helps you at the end of the year when you do your tax return. So basically it's a tax credit that reduces any income tax that you have owing. If you cannot use this benefit yourself, so let's say you have a child that has a disability tax credit, or you have somebody that's not working, or maybe they're on ODSP and their income level isn't enough to really pay tax on. If that person is dependent or supported from a parent, as an example, they can transfer that credit to the parent. And that can add up to quite a bit on, a family member, a mom or dad that's earning a good income. That makes a big difference in tax savings to them. And having the disability tax credit can open doors to other federal programs. The main one that we'll talk on tonight is Registered Disability Savings Program. There's also the Child Disability Benefit and a working income tax benefit where there's a supplement for those with disabilities that they may qualify for if they have the disability tax credit. So how does one apply for it? There is a form, it's a T2201 that needs to be completed. Now, they have to obviously be adjudicated as having a disability. Now, this criteria for disability is much stronger, much more in depth than it is for ODSP. So the definition for the disability tax credit is you must have a marked restriction in one of the activities of daily living, or a significant restriction in two or more of the activities of daily living. And those activities are basically your walking, talking, speaking, hearing, feeding, dressing, or mental functions necessary for everyday life. And it needs to be both prolonged, so lasting more than 12 months, and it needs to be present 90% of the time. So that's the key. It's not based on a diagnosis, so it's not, oh, you have autism, you get the disability tax credit, or you're a diabetic, you get the disability tax credit. It's based on how restricted your activities are because of that disability. And you have to prove that you've got that 90% restrictedness on a daily basis. So who can complete the form? The form can be completed by any medical practitioner. They've added nurse practitioners can complete the form. It can be completed by an occupational therapist, a psychologist. So you want to find the person that knows the disabled person's situation the best, the person that can talk to those challenges and obstacles and restrictions the best. That's who you want to complete that form. When it goes in, it usually takes 4 to 6 months for an approval or rejection. So hopefully let's go on the assumption that you've received an approval. So they're going to say you've been approved starting today. Now, if you've had this disability, this special need for some time, they can go back up to 10 years to say, okay, we're approving you today, but we're also going to go back 5 years, 10 years, up to 10 years, which is great because that allows you to go back and redo your income tax for those 10 years, or that whatever that time frame is. Now, when I did this years and years ago, I had to physically redo each tax return for 10 years, but it was worth it. I got, double some thousands of dollars back. It was well worth it. Now there's a simple checkbox on that form T2201. You just check off, it's done. They will do that for you. And one thing to watch for is the expiry date. So they'll come back and say you're approved. Maybe they're going back, maybe they're not, but they're also going to say you've been approved for, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. It may be indefinite, which is the nicer one to have because then there isn't a definite date where you have to reapply. So definitely watch for that with the families we work for. We take note of that. And then we get in touch with you, at least a year in advance to start prepping to make sure, that you're in line to get that application completed. Have you been talking to some practitioners to make sure that there's somebody that can talk to the disability and complete that form with accuracy? So that's the disability tax credit. So now we're going to move on to the Rdsp, the Registered Disability Savings Plan. So this is a savings plan for those with disabilities, but it's considered a long-term investment program. It's not something that's going to help you in the next few years. We consider it as a retirement pension for your child with a disability, or your person. I keep referring to child, sorry, I'm used to a room full of parents, and that may not be the case tonight, I'm not sure. But it's a long-term plan. It's going to help in a 20 to 30-year period of time. Okay, so that's important to note. So some of the general details for the program: it was launched in 2008. There's very generous federal government contributions that can be made into the plan, which we'll talk about. There's only one account allowed per beneficiary. And when we refer to the beneficiary, that's the person with the disability. One account per beneficiary, it's a lot different than if you have experience with an educational savings plan, an Rdsp, where you can have a family plan and include all your children in one account. With this, even if you have more than one child and more than one child has a disability, they each have to have their own account. And you only can have one account in existence at any one point in time. Now, it's not to say that you can't move your account from one institution to another, let's say. That is allowed, but as long as you only have one in existence at any one period of time. It's the government's way so they can easily track what's going on. So to qualify for the Rdsp, you have to be less than 60 years of age. Ideally, you want to be less than 49 years of age, and really ideally, you want to be way less than 49. And we'll talk to why that is in a moment. You need to be a Canadian resident, you need to have a social insurance number, and you need to be a recipient of the disability tax credit. That's key. So there's 5 ways to get money into this program. So you make contributions as the account holder. Anyone else can make contributions, but they do need the permission of the account holder to do that. I've never come across anyone that said, no, I don't want somebody adding money to my child's Rdsp, but that is a rule. There's federal government dollars that will and can be added to the plan. You can transfer money also from a qualified registered product. So as an example, let's say we've got an adult, they've worked a few years, they've got $75,000 in an RSP, and then they become disabled, they have a car accident, whatnot, they get the disability tax credit, they're able to open an Rdsp account. They can transfer what they have in the RRSP straight into the Rdsp. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but that's a great way of doing that and allowing them to qualify for the ODSP. And also they can transfer money from an education savings plan. The accumulated income from an RESP, the growth, if a child has an RSP and doesn't go to school, then they collapse that plan and the contributions go back to the account holder, the government money goes back to the government, but the growth would come out and it would be taxable. You're allowed to move the growth from the RESP straight into the RDSP without any taxation. So a few more tidbits of information. There's a $200,000 lifetime maximum of contributions that can be put into the plan. There's no annual limit, but there is a $200,000 maximum of your money or other family members' money perhaps going into it. Not government money, just your contributions. Contributions are not tax deductible, and the contributions must stop by the year the beneficiary reaches the age of 59. That's important. So government assistance, that's the key to this that we all want to know about. There's 2 forms. There's grant and there's bond, okay? And grants and bonds will only be paid into the account up until the beneficiary's age 49. So we heard before that we can continue to make contributions up until they're 59, but the government will only make contributions up to the age of 49. So the grant we'll delve into. If you make contributions into the RDSP, the government is willing to give you a grant, a matching grant, based on what you've put in. It's based on family net income. So family net income is, if the child is under 19, it's based on mom and dad's family net income that's declared on their income tax. If the child is over 19, it's based on their income and their income alone, or that of them and their spouse and their family. The maximum the government is willing to give is $70,000 for anyone in their lifetime. That equates to a maximum annual amount of $3,500, and they're willing to do that for a 20-year period of time. So that $3,500 for 20 years is $70,000. And again, they'll only pay that to the age of 49. Now, here's a tip that I always pass along to everyone, is that when your child is 17, do a tax return for them, whether they're earning an income or not, whether they're obviously they're not on ODSP yet or not. do a zeroed tax return if they don't have any income. Because for this to be based on their income at the age of 19, they have to, the government's always 2 years in arrears. So they have to have had a filed return the year in which they were 17. So just 00, submit it. And that way, when they turn 19, it's now moved over to their income, and there's more benefit coming from the government if that's the case. So a little bit more on the grant. So again, it's based on family net income. So if the family net income is up to $97,000, we'll just round it down here. So if it's under $97,000, the government's willing to give 300% on the first $500 that's put into the account, 200% on the next 1,000. So basically, if you put in $1,500 a year, the government's going to give you $3,500 a year. And again, they're willing to do that for 20 years to get the maximum $70,000. If your family net income is over $97,000, they're still willing to contribute. They're going to give you 100% match on up to $1,000. So you put in $1,000, they will put in $1,000, doubling your money instantly. So it's fantastic. So the bond is for low-income earners. You do not have to make any contributions whatsoever into the Rdsp plan. So the bond is, again, it's based on family net income. The maximum lifetime bond that they're willing to pay any individual is $20,000. So basically that's $1,000 a year for 20 years. And again, they'll only pay that to the age of 49. So if the family net income is under $31,700, they will get the $1,000 bond. If it's between $31,700 and $48,500, they'll get somewhere between 0 and 1,000 to be prorated based on the income level. And if the family net income is over $48,500, then there's no bond paid. It's just for the low income families. So the other bonus to doing this plan is that you're able to catch up on missed years. So let's say you just get the disability tax credit now, or you just decide to do the Rdsp now, you're able to go back 10 years. And that, then there is annual maximums on the grant and bond if you're picking up missed years that they attach to that. So this is a great idea for grandparents, other family members. Sometimes they want to help out. Maybe they don't want to buy, electronics or whatnot for gifts. This is a great gift idea because when they see the money that comes in from the government based on the amount that they're putting in, it's just phenomenal. So we've got money into the Rdsp. Now we'll just spend a quick moment on taking money out of the Rdsp. So there's two types of withdrawals. There's what's called the Lifetime Disability Assistance Payment, the LDAP, and no, it's not a dance move, or they have the Disability Assistance Payment, the DAP. So the lifetime is, the LDAP is a continual income. So once it starts, it cannot stop. It has to continue on, and you must start it by the age of 60. So the government doesn't want this money just to accumulate, and never get used. They want the child to start using it as if it's a retirement fund, start taking income at the age of 60. They can take it earlier, but by the age of 60, they have to start that lifetime income. Or the DAP is just a one-time. I need to take some money out of the plan. I need a one-time withdrawal. So each deposit is made up of contributions, growth of the investment, and the grant and the bond that's been put in. So the taxation contributions, when they come out, there's no taxation whatsoever. It was made with after-tax dollars. The growth, the grant, and the bond, however, that is taxed, but it's taxed in the hands of the beneficiary, who's typically in a lower tax bracket. There is a withdrawal formula we won't go into tonight because it is quite confusing. There's a lot of different scenarios, but in most cases, it can be up to 10% of the value each year that's in the plan. So two main keys to note about withdrawals. The money pays out to the beneficiary no matter what. So even if as a parent, you put all the money in, when it comes time to take it out, it goes straight to the beneficiary. And there's the assistance holdback rules that is key to this whole program. And that's what we call I call the aha moment. So when people say, well, this sounds too good to be true. Well, there is an aha moment, the assistance holdback amount. That states that all government money, so all the bond and the grant that goes into this account is receiving a 10-year hold. So any withdrawals that you request from the account, if it's within 10 years of the last time a bond or a grant was deposited into the account, for every dollar you take out, $3 goes back to the government, okay? So this is where we really come around to, this is the long-term aspect of this account. So to get all of the government money that's available, you need to do those maximum contributions for 20 years, and then you need to sit on the money for 10 years. So ideally, it's a 30-year program. Now, if you start and you're able to pick up on missed years, we can maybe shorten that period of time. So just the other great thing about the RDSP is it does not affect any social assistance benefits whatsoever. Old age security, the GIS, guaranteed income supplement for low-income earners after age 65, your Canada pension, subsidized housing, low-income housing, and mainly ODSP. So you can have $500,000 in this RDSP. You can be taking income out of this RDSP. It does not affect any of these benefits. They cannot look at it. It's considered an exempt asset. So this is fantastic planning for those that are especially on ODSP that can't have more than $40,000 to their name. So I know I've rattled on about a lot of ins and outs about this plan. So we're going to look at a few examples to try and pull it together. So this is a 29-year-old, opens up an RDSP. He's living out on his own. He's bringing in $1169 from the government, from ODSP. He cannot afford to put money into this plan. So he's 29, he opens the plan. He doesn't put any money in himself. Therefore, he doesn't get any government grant money. But he'll get the bond, he'll get it for this year, and he'll get it for the back 10 years because he did have the disability tax credit going back 10 years. So he just signs the paperwork, opens the account, and $11,000 shows up within 60 days of opening the account. Every year after that, as long as his income remains under the $31,000, he will receive that $1,000 of bond until it reaches the $20,000 maximum. So in this scenario, at 38, we receive the last bond, we sit on it for 10 years. So now at the age of 49, if this money grew by 4% year after year after year, there'd be approximately $40,000 there. And I know we say that's not very much money at all, but none of this was your money. This was all free money, okay? So let's take that same young man, 29 years old, but he says, you know what? I think I can contribute to this. I'm going to put $125 a month in. And that equals the $1,500. I put that $1,500 in, the government's going to put $3,500 in. I'm still going to get that same bond scenario. So he continues to put that $125 a month in all the way through for 20 years. He's put in $30,000 into that plan. The government's put $70,000 of grant money and $20,000 of bond money. So you've put in $30,000, the government's put in $90,000. Fantastic. We sit on it for 10 years now. So at the age of 59, there's going to be about $300,000 if it grew by 4% year over year over year. There would be approximately $300,000 there for his use. Phenomenal. And I always say, especially with the young adults, if they're living at home, or if they have a disability for whatever age, if they're living at home, earning ODSP, in most situations, there shouldn't be any reason why they can't contribute $125 a month of their own money into this plan. And it doesn't have to be monthly. It could be one time. This could be gift money from other, family members. It could be whatever. That's how wonderful this plan is. So this last scenario is just showing, this is what we just looked at, this scenario here. And this is showing that if maybe with the help of savings, family members, they're able to go back and pick up those 10 missed years of contributions to get that $10,500 maximum grant annual limit if they've gone back. This is how that scenario would look. And at the end of this, the whole purpose of doing this is that we shorten that time gap. So now by the age of 41, he's received all of the government money that's allowed to be put in, and now we sit on it for 10 years. So now he's able to access this at the age of 52, as opposed to the age of 59. We still received all the grant and all the bond money, but by going back, we were able to shorten that time frame. And there's still at that point in time could be approximately $265,000 there left for his use. So just a few more points to touch on. The biggest question that we get, and the biggest thing that's we come across is, what if the beneficiary no longer qualifies for the disability tax credit? So when we mentioned getting approved for the disability tax credit and them giving a expiry date when you have to reapply. So we've had many, many circumstances where somebody doesn't get reapproved. their situation has improved. They're no longer considered disabled enough to be qualified for the disability tax credit. So what happens? The old rules used to be that you had to collapse the plan immediately. You got your money back out, the beneficiary got the money back out. All the government money went back to the government, and you got to take the growth, you got to keep the growth. So it was a forced savings. You're no worse off for doing it. You get to keep the growth, and it's taxed in the hands of the beneficiary. But what they've done is in the last budget, now it hasn't received royal assent yet, but it looks like it would, and it will. And what they've done is the government has told financial institutions, these are the rules to follow. So the Rdsp would be frozen. You can no longer put any more money in. The government will no longer put any more money in, but it's allowed to remain in effect. It's not being forced to close. So the way that in which you can keep those government dollars is you must not access the funds or touch it in any way until the beneficiary reaches the age of 60. Doesn't matter about the 10-year rule or anything like that anymore. If you no longer qualify for the disability tax credit, the account gets frozen. Now it's still invested, it can still grow, but it's frozen to any contributions, and you don't get to touch it until 60. But at the age of 60, they can now start that income stream, and that money, they get to keep it. So this is a huge improvement. And the other way a beneficiary can be disqualified is if they pass away or if they move out of Canada, because it's just a federal Canadian program. So in those cases, the Rdsp does have to be collapsed. The contributions come back out. The grant and bond go back to the government if we have not satisfied that 10-year hold period. If that 10-year hold period has been satisfied, then that money then would go either to the beneficiary or to obviously their estate if they've passed away. Okay, so we're going to go on to will preparation, the final little segment of the presentation. So what happens when we pass away? Our will is our legal voice. It lays out who gets what, when, and how. It's also where trusts are created, where trustees and guardians are appointed. And there's ways that you can reduce costs and taxation by having a will drawn up properly. So if you don't have a will, what happens? Your property is divided up according to the law. So there's provincial guidelines that says all the money goes into your estate. And if you have a spouse or common law partner, they get that money. If there's a child, then the child gets the money. If there's no common law partner, no child, then it goes to parents, then it goes to siblings, nieces and nephews, and down the chain. So there is a list. So by not having a will, this money may not be going to who you want it to go to. There's definitely time delays if you don't have a will. As an example, somebody has to apply to be the executor of the will to be able to have any control or touch any of the money that's in the estate. That could take 4 to 6 months just to apply to be the executor. There's extra expenses involved. And if there isn't a will and the beneficiary, a child with a disability, receives this money outright, then there is a really high likelihood that they're going to lose Rdsp, that guaranteed government income stream. And once that's gone, they may not have the wherewithal themselves, they may not have the supports of others to help them reapply once they blow all the inheritance money. And then also whether the person is disabled or not, they might not have the ability to manage funds properly. So by having a will, you can dictate and put special parameters in there, like I leave so much to my kids, but they're going to get a third at the age of 20, a third at the age of 25, and a third of the estate at the age of 30, as an example. So there's a lot more control of how you can distribute your estate. So I'm going to talk about the Henson Trust mainly because that's the one that most of you have probably heard of. I'm not going to go into sort of the background, Leonard and Audrey Henson, how it came to be. Just for time tonight, I'm going to skip that section. There's 4 key criteria for an effective Henson Trust to be met. And if one of these are not met, it blows the whole trust apart and it does not wash. So if you need one to be put in the will, you need to make sure you're working with a lawyer that has experience in writing these to make sure that these 4 components are dealt with. There has to be a name for the trust, like John Doe's Trust. Okay, simple as that, it needs to be a name. It needs to state that it's a fully and absolutely discretionary trust. This means that the beneficiary has no rights to this money whatsoever in their own regard. It's placed in trust. A trustee doles it out for their benefit, but they, by not having any rights to it, it's not an asset in their name. Therefore, they're allowed to stay on ODSP. That's the key. There's an accumulation provision. So with every trust, there's a 21-year ruling that says all the income, the growth generated from the money invested in the trust can stay within that trust. But after 21 years, that money has to be paid out. If that money is paid out to the beneficiary, we've just lost the ODSP. So there can be a clause in there that says at that 20-year mark that any growth, any income provision gets paid out to somebody else. So that's the way that we can continue to work this for the beneficiary. And the other key is that it has to deal with the death of the beneficiary. So there has to be a residual beneficiary. And this gives us control as well, because we can say, I want this money to go in trust for my child with a disability. But when he passes away, he or she passes away, any funds remaining in the trust, I then want them to go to my other children, as an example. So without that, it's not a valid trust. And that's taking care of the residual beneficiary. And this gives us control, because if we didn't have a will and this money went to our child with a disability, maybe they lose ODSP and they spend through that money, there's nothing there at the end of the day. Or maybe there's money left, but now they pass away and it's going to go through their will or their rulings. Maybe it's going to go to their common law spouse then. You've sort of lost control of maybe keeping those assets within your own family borders. So a little bit more on the Henson Trust. We talked about ODSP. So there's no effect on the ODSP having money in the trust as an asset. It's a fully exempt asset. There are income limitations, however. Any money in a trust, the beneficiary is only allowed $10,000 a year in income from the trust without it affecting their ODSP, unless it's for a disability-related item or it's for purchasing of an exempt asset. So there could be $500,000 in this trust, and they could pull out $600,000 and say, I'm going to buy him a condo. That's allowed. Every province is different in their maximums and whatnot. In Ontario, there is no maximum to the amount of money that can be in a Henson Trust. So it's great for large inheritance and rollovers. Back years ago, trusts were very beneficial. Everybody that had a trust, and they were very popular because well-to-do families could put money in trust for somebody else and have the trust taxed at the beneficiary's tax level for children, people with disabilities, whatnot. So they were able to lower their taxation to quite a great extent. 2016-17, they changed that. The government realized we're letting a lot of money walk away here. We want some of that back. So they changed to say all trusts are now taxed at the highest marginal tax rate, except if it qualifies for a qualified disability trust. And if the beneficiary has the disability tax credit, it qualifies as a QDT. But only one trust can qualify. So you can have as many Henson trusts as you want. So each grandparent on both sides of the family and aunts and uncles, everybody can leave money to your child with a disability in a Henson trust. That's totally allowed, but only one can qualify for the reduced preferential tax treatment. And it's important to note that you cannot combine money from one Henson trust into another. If it's done through the testamentary, which is the most common way, it has to remain that trust. So each person that passes away, if they're leaving money, it goes into an individual Henson trust. They cannot be combined. So choosing a trustee, this is critical. This is where I find so many people put off doing their will and put off putting a trust in their will. And that's critical, because if something happens to them, then there's nothing in place, and that's devastating. So I always say we need to do one, even if we have to readdress this later and make changes to it. It's a simple codicil to the will. It's not going to cost much. Let's get it done. So things to look for. You want somebody that's highly involved in the beneficiary's life, somebody that's trustworthy, and sensitive to the beneficiary's needs. But you'd also like somebody that understands the ODSP rules and the Rdsp benefits, that's good with numbers, can do the tax returns, those sorts of things. Now, ideally, it would be great to have joint trustees. So you have one that maybe is better with the number side of things, one that's more close to the beneficiary, better for the sensitivity of the needs and the care for that child. Now, I know in a lot of families, we don't have all these great people that are able to go into that position. But ideally, that would be the way to do it. You want to make sure the trustee has longevity. So if we name our parent, the child's grandparent, well, most likely they're not going to live to see this trust through, because this trust, depending on the age when we pass away for our child, could be, in place for decades. So that's something to look at. We always want to make sure that we name alternate trustees. So I always say name as many as you can come up with to say that, it's going to go to my parents first. But if they're unable to act or they predecease me, then it's going to go to, my brother, his niece or nephew, or, and then just name, because a lot of times that person may be in a totally different situation. They may be out of the country. They may not be with it or available to act. So name as many as you can, just in case, and because this could go on for decades. You have to watch for conflict of interest, and I hate to bring this up because we all think we're, loving families and whatnot, but here's an example. You have two children. One has special needs, one does not. You leave the money in a trust for your child with special needs, and you name your other neurotypical child as the trustee. He is also the residual beneficiary of the trust. So if he perhaps was never sensitive to his siblings' needs and would maybe say, no, get off your butt and go get a job. I'm not paying you any money out of this trust to help you live off of, because at the end of the day, it all comes to me if something happens to you. So we like to think that does not happen, but something to consider, okay? If we don't have any of these people, that would be the proper best choice. We can name a trust company, we can name a lawyer. Most lawyers will have somebody that handles trusts in their office. Now this comes obviously at a price tag, there's compensation there. So it's not ideal, but I always say, get this in place first, even if you have to name a trust company or lawyer for now, and then when somebody else more suitable comes along, then add them and change the trustee. Worst case scenario, if there's no will, if there's nothing written, it falls to the public guardian and trustee, a government agency, which we like to really try and avoid. And I always suggest that you give as much preparation for the trustee as possible, a list of advisors, as I call it, where it says, we work with this financial advisor, they understand the Rdsp, this is the person at the ODSP office is our caseworker. Here's the lady at Special Olympics, the coach that we're really close to. Here's, the contact information at community living. Whoever, all these people, these are the people we've been talking about group homes with, just help them out as much as possible. Another alternative, so if we don't want to do the Henson Trust, perhaps our estate isn't that large, or perhaps money's being left from somebody else and it wasn't put into a trust, we can move and have that money go into the Rdsp. So as we mentioned, there's up to a $200,000 limit of contributions. As we saw from our examples, $30,000 of your money is all that it takes to get the maximum grant and bond from the government. So that leaves quite a lot of money that could come from a direct transfer into the Rdsp. Now, when a large sum comes in like that, it's not going to get any grant or bond other than maybe that 1 year, whatever that amount is. But it's a way of protecting the money and also having access to more of the money. Because if it's in the trust, then they're limited to that $10,000 asset limit or income limit. If it's in the Rdsp, they have much more access to more of that money without it affecting their ODSP. It's exempt from ODSP. And again, it's another way of rolling over RSP assets. So as an example, parent situation, they have registered money, they pass away. When the first person passes away in a relationship, any registered money moves tax deferred to the surviving spouse. When the last person passes away, those registered dollars all get added to their income in the final year. That could very well put their tax bracket up to the highest bracket, and 53%, as an example, of the money that's in that RSP has now just gone to the government as opposed to going to the beneficiaries. You can roll over RSP assets if the beneficiary is financially dependent on you on a tax deferred basis. So that's huge, huge way of saving tax dollars. And the last one I'm going to touch on is what's called an inheritance trust. So again, it's for smaller amounts, great for other family members that might be wanting to leave money. You can have up to $100,000 in just a regular testamentary trust, an annuity, or a segregated fund, which is basically like a mutual fund type investment that's done through an insurance company. The effects on ODSP you're allowed is considered exempt if it remains below 100,000. So you never want to put in exactly 100,000 because we like to think it's going to grow. And anything over the growth would then be counted as income. So, maybe 80,000, maybe 90,000, depending on what you think might be coming out of that trust. And you have 6 months from the receipt of that money to do something with it. Now, ODSP, you tell them we've received this money and we're working with somebody and we're going to put it into a segregated fund or whatnot, or a trust. And you can have 6 months to do that. What they will probably do is stop the ODSP for the months that money is sitting in the bank account, but then it will come back on. So the sooner you get to get this set up, the sooner the ODSP stays in effect. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. We're 5 minutes to 8. I'm willing to hang on as long as questions are being asked. So Adriana, I'll throw it back to you to see is there any chatter out there?
I haven't seen any chats apart from what was coming through with the complications of logging on and then others not having any issues. Karen, first of all, I'd like to thank you again. Great presentation. Thank you for taking the time. I know this is very special and dear to your heart. You're very passionate about sharing this information. So having said that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you have for Karen at this particular time.
I'm going to sing the Jeopardy tune.
If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and then just go ahead and speak. Or if you don't want to speak, you can always put it in the chat box. And Karen or I don't know if you can see them, Karen, but
No.
Okay, no questions. Just want to say it was very informative presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. So you've got my contact information here. By all means, feel free to reach out to me with any questions that happen after the fact, just to, throw out your personal situation. If you want to just see, how certain things relate to you, I'd be more than happy to chat with you. If you need to or want to open an RDSP or talk about whether that should be a viable option or not in your situation, I'd love to chat with you about that. If you have one maybe with another financial institution, but you're not getting the specialized planning that you should have, or you've been relegated to just a client service 1-800 number, because nobody there tends to know a lot of detail, by all means, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you. And I'm just going to give you also, just to stay informed, if you'd like, you can follow us on Facebook or LinkedIn, Special Needs Planning with Spectrum Financial. We have constant updates on just anything related to special needs with the rules, the regulations, any changes. We'll keep you abreast of those, and just informative articles and pieces of information we tend to share.
Hey, Karen.
Hi.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you. I just want to confirm, our son is currently 17. He's going to be 18 this year.
Okay.
So from what you said earlier, if we were to do do his taxes this year, then when he's 19, he
Yes.
can have that 2-year back there. So going forward, when he's 19, it's based off of his income and not our income.
That's right, and that's strictly for the RDSP and the level of grant that he would be entitled to. Yes.
Now, would he get the grant and the bond, or would it just be the grant?
So the grant, if you put money in or he puts money in, the grant will happen. The bond will happen as long as his income's under 32,000, which it definitely will be if ODSP is the only income. So absolutely, he would get the bond as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
We have another chat here. No question. That was very informative presentation. I will gladly share this with my neighbors who have special needs themselves, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
No question. Just wanted to say very informative presentation. Thank you. I do want to take, thank you so much. Great presentation. I will keep this as a resource, says Roxanne. I do want to point out that this information, Karen is licensed in Ontario. This information is based of Ontario, because I know sometimes we have international users or attendees, I should say. So I want to make sure that you are confirming wherever it is that you are, that this information is relevant, or just checking what is relevant in your area.
And also, if I can add too, Adriana, is that there's so much information here, and it was so hard to put together in such a small time frame. And I did back, because I've been doing these for many, many years. In the fall, I did do Zoom webinars, and I broke what I've done today into 3 separate components. There's one on RDSPs, one on ODSP and disability tax credit, and one on just the estate planning. So I do have the recordings of those. If anyone is interested, just let me know, send me an email, and I'd be glad to share those with you.
Do you ever reach out to clients who might be in group homes, is a question Roxanne is asking.
Absolutely, it'll all depend on who has the power-making, decision-making capabilities. Some group homes depends on where the income is going. A lot of times their ODSP or whatnot is paid strictly into the group home, but we can sort of have conversations with them to see if that's something that can be arranged. Again, competency comes into question. You know, is the person competent enough to go into the contract on their own? Is there still parental, somebody that could do the account holder or a joint basis? So definitely something that we could still perhaps work with, absolutely.
Karen, I have a question. If anybody in the audience has a need or knows of somebody that has a need and they would like to work with you, is there an hourly rate? Because I think sometimes people shy away and want to do things themselves. This can become very complex, especially if somebody has, very limited time because they are caring for somebody with special needs. So just give us a little bit of information. I mean, what would I be considering out of pocket, really, if any?
Great question. Yes. So I haven't gone to the where of a fee for planning basis, because to me, this is passionate. I do it because I want it to improve. I understand, I get it. So I get compensated if we do investments. So in most cases, I'm going to put an RDSP perhaps in effect in place for you, or maybe transfer over one you have at a bank or something where you're not getting the specialized service. So if I'm managing an investment of some sort, whether it's RSPs, tax-free savings accounts for yourself, or the RDSP for the child, I get compensated through that stream. And in that, I just do all of this planning as an add-on, a value-added service, if I'm working with you anyway. So I know I do get a lot of questions to say, well, we've already got our investments somewhere else and we're quite happy. We just want to talk to you about, helping us with the planning. So it is something I'm looking at, perhaps coming up with an hourly type rate. But at this point, most clients, when I sort of explain it to them, they're going, okay, no, you manage the assets, and by all means, we want to have, this planning in place. And just to note, I do have experience and I can talk to, will planning and whatnot, but I'm not a lawyer. And that is something that you would still need to seek out. I do have people I know that are more, experienced in this sort of area that I can refer you to. But you do need somebody that's sort of coordinating all of this. And you can manage an RDSP perhaps, through the bank on your own and all these different things. But it's how do you pull it all together to say, where are we getting the tax savings from? Are we tapping into everything that's available to us? But thank you. Great question, Joanna.
So just to make sure that we're understanding, in the future, Karen might have a fee for service, but right now, basically, she gets compensated from wherever you place the product, whether it be RDSP with, I don't know, RBC or one of the financial companies. So nothing really holding anybody back from getting this on track for your loved one. There's another question. Do they only backtrack for as long as you had an RDSP? That's from Brooke.
So the RDSP, we can go back as long as up to the time 10 years, or as long as you've had the disability tax credit. So that's the key. So if you've had the disability tax credit, let's say since the child was born, absolutely, you open up an Rdsp today, you can go back to 10 years. If you've only had the disability tax credit for 2 years, then we're only able to go back that 2 years and make up those missed contribution time. Hopefully that answers the question.
Does that help, Brooke? Perfect, thanks. Okay.
Okay.
Again, if you know, if it's a more personal question, more specialized question, feel free to reach out to Karen and discuss. Like I said, she's a fountain of information when it comes to this topic and finances. One more thing that we didn't touch on that is very important is life insurance as well. You know, we never know when we might need that. You know, we always say about having life insurance for our children. You know, I don't want any money, but when it comes to healing, I mean, I can only speak to when I lost somebody just recently. It took me 3 years to pretty much get back on my feet and be able to manage my business, because I couldn't put 2 sentences together without lashing out at somebody. So these are the sorts of things that life insurance is put in place for, just to give us that time for healing.
Actually, thank you so much for bringing that up, because typically I have 2 slides on that. And because I was just trashing and pulling out because I wanted to stay within the time frame. But the life insurance is the least expensive way of leaving money to your family. And in doing so, there are so many ways. I mean, one, it's a way of funding a trust or funding the Rdsp upon your death. That's fantastic. But it's also great for your other children, because we didn't touch on housing and all those other things. There's so much information. But it's beneficial perhaps to leave the home to the child with a disability. It might be preferential to leave the RSP money, because we save a lot of tax by doing that. But what about our other kids then? So life insurance is another way of saying, okay, yes, we're pushing all of this money over to the special needs child because there's a lot of great tax savings and reasons to do that. What about the rest of the family? Well, putting in a permanent life insurance, it's the least expensive way of doing that, and having a payout go to your other children as an example. So thank you for bringing that up. It's just, yeah, that was one of the slides I cut.
No, I know your presentation is, I've been part of the physical one where you actually are in person giving the presentation. I've been part of it, and I know how extent it is in really dealing with the issue. So again, if you come up with another question, if something's, you know, lingering in your mind, in your heart, reach out. If you can't get a hold of Karen, reach out to me and I will definitely connect you with Karen. Don't forget about this is all brought to you, for those that came in a bit later, through Women, Wellness, and Wealth. We believe in the wellness of women, and if you have a child with special needs, you need the support system. And this is why we've brought different experts, Karen being one of them, to help women, and in this particular case, gentlemen. This is all done for International Women's Day. So connect to the page. It's at W3 Empowerment. We will have definitely other topics that are coming up this year that are relevant to women, community in general. One last thing, don't forget about the Passport to Win. This is for our grand prizes. Again, this event was brought to you for International Women's Day. So we have a lot of our speakers are donating prizes, and some are donating grand prizes. So thank you again. If there's no other questions, I will definitely say good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Choose the challenge, everybody. Choose the challenge, inequality, whatever is in your heart. Choose the challenge.
Thank you, Adriana, for setting this all up and for all you do. We so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you to each attendee for their time as well.
Absolutely. Have a great night, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.